Hey everyone, just wanted to let you know that if you like Danger Close, be sure to follow at This Is Ironclad on Instagram, YouTube, and all major platforms. They're the team that produces Danger Close and all of the trailers for the Terminal List novels. They also produce and distribute more great content like Change Agents with Andy Stumpf, which I executive produce, Oil and Whiskey with Roadster Shop, which features guests including Joe Rogan, Jesse James, and others, and the behind-the-scene filmmaking series Into the Fray, and a bunch more. Into the Fray recently broke down the making of the trailer for my latest novel, Only the Dead, starring my friend and teammate Dom Rasso as James Reese. Remember, that's at This Is Ironclad on YouTube and Instagram. This is the Danger Close podcast, Beyond the Books with me, Jack Carr. Welcome to the Danger Close podcast, an Ironclad original presented by Navy Federal Credit Union. My novel, Only the Dead, is on shelves right now. Today's guest, Joshua Hood. He's a veteran of the 82nd Airborne in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. He is also a SWAT team officer and the author of multiple novels. His latest, The Guardian, is out now. And now, without further ado, Josh Hood. Oh, man. Awesome. Glad we made it happen. And it seems like we have a good connection and everything. So the storms have subsided a little bit here in Park City. So that helps with the connection, which is great.
You're fresh from Hawaii.
Fresh from Hawaii, yes. Took the little one out there for his first time, going to see Punch Bowl National Cemetery and going to Pearl Harbor to see, obviously, the Arizona Memorial, and then USS Missouri. Moored over on the other side right there. So you see the beginning of World War II and then the end where the Japanese surrendered on the decks of the Missouri. And then they literally the kids liked going through the Bowfin submarine. So there's a World War II submarine that's docked there too. And you can go through that thing. And it's pretty wild to think how long those guys spent on that thing in World War II. It's just tiny. And there's very few guys were on it, actually, it seemed like.
Yeah, that's like almost become like a familial pilgrimage. You've taken all the kids there. Yeah. Is there a certain age that you wait, or?
Well, I went when I was 9. My parents took me when I was 9 because my grandfather's name's on the MIA wall up there at Punch Bowl. And so I went there when I was 9. I have pictures of that. My daughter was older, so she was 16 when we went and took those World War II veterans back for the 80th anniversary commemoration events.
Which was awesome.
Yeah, it was life-changing for her, for sure. Now she has like 82nd Airborne flags in her, and 101st Airborne flags and stuff in her room, because she's spent so much time with these guys now doing that, and then going to Normandy in the following June and taking those guys. I mean, she was standing on the beach at Normandy with someone who's in the first wave.
Dude.
Incredible.
I mean, yeah, we used to, when I was at the 82nd, we would have All-American Week. And so all the old timers would come back and, you do a run, like it's a whole week. And it's just kind of like honoring them, honoring the heritage. And it was kind of weird. Yesterday, I guess I've been just tuned out, but they're changing the names of all these posts. And so like Fort Bragg, I guess is going to be like Fort Liberty or something. And that was just weird. But thinking back to talking to those guys, they're like, oh man, they were always so humble. They would like try to pump us up. And I was a brand new, like E4, like a nobody. And, one of these guys is talking about like all that we were doing in the war on terror, et cetera. And he's wearing like, his just a sports coat, but he's got his jump wings on there with the flash. He's got 3 mustard stains, 3 combat jumps. I'm like, dude, like I've always been a buff. I knew I was going to be in the military when I was young. So like, I've read all the books, Night Drop, everything. And I'm like, I'm talking to a legend, I'm like, how can you, say that? But they really don't. I don't think they understand. Maybe they do, but like the gravity of what they did.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get it.
It's just amazing.
They're so humble. All the ones that we have to spend time with over the last couple of years. But I wonder how many practice jumps that he did before he did those 3 combat jumps. Was it like 5? And then so he has 8
he
total?
He actually made a joke about that. That's what started it, I think. Now that you say it, he's like, how many jumps do you have? And I was like, I think we do like 4 or 5 at jump school, but by then I had like 10 or 12, and he's like, I think he said I had 7. He's like, I only had 7. And that's when I looked down at his mustard stain. I'm like, yeah, but 3 of those were combat jumps, bro. And he's
That's
like, oh,
amazing.
and I'm like, oh,
Oh,
like 7 jumps and 3 of those, like,
Yeah.
you're out of
Yeah.
jump school. Let's go to Italy and jump in there. And then so it's just because he was in I think it was at Anzio maybe,
Yeah.
and then he jumped into Normandy, and then he jumped into Market Garden.
Yeah.
oh man, that's so wild. And so many of those guys did that. They're like, yeah, I got 6 jumps, 7 jumps, 8 jumps, and yeah, 3 of those were combat jumps in World War II. It's amazing, man. Well, what was your path into 82nd Airborne? Did you know you were going to go into the military like from the time you were a little kid? And what was your path in?
I did. My mom was one of those, you're going to college, right? And so we grew up poor, but blessed in that I went to like a private school on scholarship. So went to this real rich school, and we were like, the poor kids, but it was a college prep school. So to them, like going into the military, like, this is graduating high school in 98. So that was like kind of like you wanted to be a garbage man. And it was really weird because my dad was in Vietnam. His dad was in World War II and stuff. And
Oh wow, what did they do in World War II in Vietnam?
well, my grandfather was a test pilot, and
Whoa.
he began to do the first night fighter stuff, and he would test the German like planes that they brought back, and he wanted to fly in combat really bad, but he had learned so much, especially that's when night fighting, I guess, was becoming like a thing, that they're like, dude, you can't do that. We're not letting you go. So he kept putting in applications after applications, and they said, like, it's not happening. We'll send you to Guam. So they sent him to Guam, but that really bothered him. And so he came back and he was like, I'm going to get out. And then, instead of that, they said, look, you're a pretty smart guy. We want to send you to Harvard Business School. And the goal was, I don't know how he really got into it, but he took over he was one of the lead guys on the Minuteman missile system and the Polaris that came out of submarines. So he went to Harvard and then came back. And then after that, I think he retired as a lieutenant colonel. Then he went and worked for Raytheon. And then, so my dad grew up in the military, going from base to base, and he got out of high school and enlisted in the Navy, and did 2 tours in Vietnam. He worked on a carrier or something with
wow.
like bombers. I don't really understand, but he would tell these stories about them loading the Agent Orange onto these bombers, and they would be leaking, and they would hit the deck and burn holes. He was on a carrier called the Ticonderoga, which was like an old World War II carrier. So
Oh,
it was, I guess, a lot different than the way it is now.
that is crazy. Those leaking bombs,
Yeah,
man.
and
I'm guessing
he
the
ended up
safety.
getting cancer from it.
What?
And
Oh man.
yeah, but it worked out. I mean, it
Gosh.
was everything fixed, but it was. I was like, nobody was kind of like, hey, this is probably not safe. And he's like, oh, that's not how the Navy was back in the day. Master Chief told you to load something, you load something. I
Wow.
was like, okay.
Yeah,
And
little
so,
different.
yeah,
A little different back
a
then.
lot
And
different.
I'm sure they weren't. I'm sure they weren't in the proper. What is it? What PPE? Whatever. Personal protective equipment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure they were not in that. It was just like bare hands loading that stuff, probably back in the day. I'm sure. Oh man, that is wild. What did he do when he got back from Vietnam or from his time in the Navy?
He became a hard hat diver. He went
Oh,
to Galveston.
okay.
It's kind of funny. My dad and I shared this common thread. Like, he ended up being a graphic artist,
Whoa.
but growing up in this masculine culture, like, his dad basically told him, like, being an artist is not what
Yeah.
men do. And so he kind of spent his formative years in the Navy. He enlisted at 17, did his 2 tours, got out, went and became a hard hat diver
Wow.
in Texas. So he like worked on oil rigs. And I guess he like somewhere during that time, he's like, I've earned my man card. Then he used his GI Bill to go to what do they call it? Art school. It's like a college,
Yeah.
Memphis College of Fine Art. Went
Okay.
there, and kind of spent the rest of his life as a graphic artist.
No kidding. That is wild. What did he do? Who did he work for? Was he on his own or did he work for somebody?
No, he worked for some companies here in Memphis, where I'm from. I don't know, they were like the modern precursors of Mad Men. So they're advertising agencies.
Okay.
He did a lot of stuff with FedEx and things like that. But what was crazy is growing up, he spent a small period of time working for himself. He started his own business doing the thing. And back then they didn't have like computers.
Yeah.
So when I was little, I remember watching him, they would have like, hey, you're going to make an ad. And literally he would sit there and he'd just make it. Like, he'd get the board and sit there and draw. And then for type, he would literally cut out these little stencils of type and put it on there. And then he would take me to the printers. And like my mom would get pissed because they use ether in the printing, because they would take this image, they would actually like make it's not called a stencil, but it's like basically a metal stencil, and then they would run it through these awesome printers. But to cut the ink, they would use ether. So I'd sit there, be getting all high, and but it was cool to me because downstairs was this old Army Navy surplus. So I'd always, kind of go with them, and afterwards get to go in there and like check out all the cool stuff.
Oh yeah, dude, Army Navy surplus stores as a kid were just so awesome. Much fun, so cool. I mean, just like an ammo can and some camo netting. It's like, whoa.
Yeah.
And then the stuff behind the glass, like the knives that were
couldn't have
$300, like it's like, wow, $300. Like that was big money. Might as well been 10 million, and you can see that stuff behind the counter there, or look at sometimes maybe some paintball stuff over there. Like, what's that? That's amazing. Like that was just so cool to run around those stores as a kid and check out all those ammo cans. And sometimes they'd have like a Jeep or something kind of parked, like the owner would have one or something like that. Maybe it was for sale, maybe not, but, or some sort of the truck, just camoed out, just sitting there. I love those stores as a kid. So awesome.
I love that smell. It's like
they all smell
and the smell of like a bookstore.
Yeah.
Or two, like, and I would go in there. And I remember, like you said, I got like a little ammo can one day to put my like cars in. And then one of the Marine, just OD, like the hats they had, we'd have our patrol caps in the Army, but the Marines, and you guys use them too, they have that specific looking. And I thought that thing was so legit.
Yeah.
The guy had a 30 cal machine gun. It was like this oversized machine gun. And I guess it was maybe used as like a training aid.
Yeah.
But I was always like, can I buy that? He'd be like, no, that's not for sale. Guys back there smoking Marlboro Reds. Like, that's not for sale. And I was like, but it's in here. And he's like, well, if it was, you couldn't afford it. But, those things kind of like, if you grow up hearing about the military, hearing a little bit about Vietnam, you kind of get there, you're touching it. It kind of becomes almost like a mythology or whatever, and you want to go do that.
Yeah. So did you listen to your mom and go to school first, or did you go right in?
I did. I went to college, and I was in college when September 11th happened. And I was working at UPS throwing boxes, and I saw it on the TV. And then I watched like Operation Anaconda, and I'm like, Mom, like please. And she's like, hell no, you want to go graduate earlier. And so started going to summer school and everything, got out, went to see, before I graduated, I went to see like a recruiter.
Yeah.
And they're like, you could be an officer, but they couldn't guarantee you a spot. And I was like, I want to go Airborne Infantry. And they're like, well, as an officer, it doesn't work that way. And I was like, well, screw it, I'll enlist. And so that was like I graduated December of 2003. And at that same time, my brother had just finished high school, and he did not listen to my mother and enlisted in the infantry. And so he shipped out to boot camp, and I think it was like April of 2004, I went to boot camp, and by then he was in Iraq. And so he's sending me these letters from Mosul and stuff. And I'm sitting there like, the older brother supposed to be kind of like leading the way, like making sure my bed's made and reading about like this firefight. I'm like, man, this is, but
he was up there in 04 in Missoula.
Yep. 04 through 05. And then came back a little bit, and then he went back during the surge, spent 15 months in Mosul, and then they ended up going down to Sadr City and spent so while I was in Afghanistan, he was in Sadr City, and my mom was her nerves were frayed.
I bet not thrilled with that, I'm sure.
Not happy.
Oh man, well, I probably crossed paths with him, or at least we walked the same ground in Mosul in 2004. Then I was up there then. But so how was boot camp?
Really wasn't that bad. I mean, I was older than most of the guys,
Yeah.
because I think at that time I was like 22.
You're the old man. Yeah.
I was. And like the biggest thing for me was the realization that, like you get there and the drill instructors are going off, and I'm like, they would do something, get mad at me. I'm like, these dudes don't know who I am, but the other guys, they don't realize that. They think they take everything personal and, it's whatever. And I'm like, these guys have no idea like who I am. This isn't personal. They're just playing this game. And so the only bad thing that happened at basic training in the Army, they used to have, if you signed up for infantry, you could pick your job. So you could be like an 11 Bravo, a rifleman, 11 Charlie. I think there was like 11 Hotel, which is like a tow gunner or something. And then there was something else. And they changed that around that time. And so you became an 11 X-ray. And so I didn't really know what a mortar was. And then I started looking into it, and I was like, damn, dude, I don't want that job. Is there any way that I can make sure to get 11 Bravo? They're like, no, but there's a small chance you'll get that. And I go to basic, and like, I think it was like the first couple of days or maybe a week we were there, they start handing out jobs, and it was like, they call my name and they're like, you and these other dudes are 11 Charlies. I'm like, oh shit. And I was like, how do you, so I go to the drill sergeant, and you're not supposed to talk to him. And I'm like, excuse me, drill sergeant, I can't be 11 Charlie. I got to be an 11 Bravo. That's what I signed up for. 11 Bravos are awesome. I don't want to do anything with the mortar. And this dude's this big Samoan. He's like, listen, you bastard, I'm an 11 Charlie. And I'm like, oh God.
Dang it.
So he's like, I don't ever want to hear that again. So it was one of those.
That's always how it goes. That was inevitable right there. He was going to be the exact thing that you didn't want to be.
I had to take my shot though. And,
oh man.
He turned out to be cool. He was in Anaconda, got messed up. His leg did, and never really enjoyed being a mortar, but it was like one of those things where you're like, the big Army doesn't really care what I want.
That's right. Needs of the Army. That's right. They're not as concerned what's going on with Josh Hood, what Josh Hood wants. So what'd you do from boot camp? Did you go to the end of that special MOS school, or how does that?
The way it is it's all one thing. So in the rest of I think in the Navy, they have what are called A schools, I think. Yeah. So we have, that's called AIT, Advanced Individual Training. Yeah. For infantry, it's just all one thing. You don't go anywhere. You don't stop. It's just like, hey, you're an AIT. You're like, I'm doing the exact same stuff. And towards the very end, you have a couple weeks.
Are you still getting yelled at, making your bed, doing the same thing, like living in barracks and doing the whole deal?
Still the same thing. I was actually telling my wife, in the basic, how we'd make our beds and then you'd sleep on top of the bed so you wouldn't have to make it when you woke up.
Yeah, just kind of knead it up a little bit, just a little adjustment.
Yeah, just pull it tight. And
I haven't thought about that in a long time. I try to blank out all those things that were just pretty much useless. I mean, I understand obviously why you have to do it. Now we all, anyway, but so boot camp and OCS were pretty much the exact same thing, just getting yelled at. Like in the Navy boot camp, you get yelled at by Navy people. In Navy OCS, you get yelled at by Marine drill instructors. So you just get yelled at louder, I guess. But so yeah, I block those parts of my life out totally. I never think about them unless it comes up in a conversation.
It's weird. This just comes up, little things come up, kind of like you talking about, going to Pearl Harbor, those little drops of oil still coming up and you don't think about it. And I was helping her make the bed, and I can't remember what we were talking about.
So hold on. We're going to edit this part out in case my wife listens. You help make the bed?
Yeah.
Edit this out. Make a note. Just kidding. Just kidding. Man, that's good.
No, I wasn't. It wasn't like I was voluntold, like, help me make the bed. I'm like, hey, I'm a part of this relationship. I can make a bed. And, so I'm helping do that thing. I do not, and this is terrible. I should be better at this. After all the bed making I've done in my life, I refuse to make a bed in the morning.
Me too. I don't do it.
I'm like, whatever. Like, I know Admiral McRaven says that that's like the part of your day, but I'm like, That bed can
not
suck
doing it. Yeah, I'm not doing it either. Only times I made my bed were at boot camp and at OCS. It's just, I gotta get on with the day. I got things to do. It's gotta go.
Yeah, I don't have time. That bed's, it's served its purpose.
Yeah, it's good. I'm gonna get right back in it later. Yeah,
I'm like,
my wife
the
likes
way
to
it
make
is, it's ready.
I saw something on it was like Babylon Bee or something like that, and it was one of those things where like husband mentions that the toothpaste tube is out and magically one appears the next day. I was like, yeah, that tends to happen around here as well. But so what happens then?
Equal division of labor,
Yeah.
I think that like awesome. You got this world, this nation trying to pull everybody apart, and like all this BS, and it's like my wife enjoys when I pump the gas for her. She don't want to pump gas, and I enjoy when she makes the bed, and she's awesome at getting toothpaste when I would probably forget and be like, do you have any baking soda? And it's like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Josh, you're going to get canceled. This is very, incendiary conversation right here.
Well, I don't think me personally would make such a blip, but it's like, if I was a woman, like I teach my daughter all the time, it's a man's job to treat you well. Like, why would you not expect someone to do that?
Yeah. That's good. A good example for kids to see for sure. That stays with them. So what did you do? When did you learn how to drop that mortar?
It was like the last 2 weeks of basic, and it really wasn't. They showed you how to set it up, and it was a lot of running. If you didn't get it set up in time, you would have to grab it, and they'd say you'd run to the wood line, and a lot of ruck marching with mortar rounds just to basically let you know that like you're going to the big army. There's a very, very small percentage of mortarmen 11 Charlies, and you are the bastard stepchild. No one's going to like you, and you're going to hate life. We want you to make sure you understand that now.
Yeah.
And, message received, and then went to airborne school.
Okay.
Showed up at Fort Bragg. I was in the 3rd of the 504, and like, forget everything you learned. This is how we really do it.
Nice. And 82nd Airborne, for those listening, like that's a very large organization.
It is. It's pretty big. It's responsible for many other things, they always have a unit on call, a battalion on call. So they call it the DRF cycle, I think, if I'm remember. So while one brigade or battalion's training, one's doing something else, and one's always on call. So that means all your gear, everything you have is packed away. Your room's packed up. You got to keep your phone on. You can't go certain distance, and then they'll call you and do these tests.
Yeah.
And, you have to be ready to roll out, and that's kind of what the 82nd does, and that and a lot of jumping and rucking.
Yeah, that's army training right there. How long were you there before you first deployed?
I was there not quite a year, and we were on a DRF cycle, and then we were supposed to go to Afghanistan for the elections, and we were at the tail end of that cycle. So they said, no, we're going to let somebody else go. And so I'm just, everybody's got combat infantryman badges, combat patches. I'm the only new guy in the whole, so I'm like, man, I really want to go. And that didn't happen. And so we got sent to West Point to do some training. They have something called Camp Natural Bridge. And I guess that's where, if you're about to be an officer, that's where they go to summer. They don't get to go home. They go there and they learn to call in fire and do all this other stuff. And then I got back from that. We went on block leave, and we got the call to go to Iraq.
Nice.
And I think that was beginning of 05 and 06, and we went, and we were supposed to go to Talifar. Apparently, there wasn't anything happening at the time, and so they sent us to Al Assad, and we got attached to the 2nd Marine Division, and we went up into Hoklaniya, cleared that town, Haditha, and after that they split us. Half of us went to Ramadi. It was attached to one of the JTTFs. Nice. Nothing sexy, we were just a blocking position because I think the Rangers were down in Fallujah. Then I got sent up with the Marines to a place called Al Qaim, and we they sent a MEU up there, and we basically there was an operation. I never found out what it was called, but we cleared all these little towns, and then we ended up going back to Ramadi to finish out the rest of the time. And
oh man,
that was a nasty, dangerous place.
Yeah, we were probably there maybe about some overlap. I was in Ramadi 05 into 06, and then went to do a mission in Baghdad for a little while. So we're probably in and around some of those same places at similar times. Anyway, but man, were you acting as like a mortarman throughout this? Or are you now like that's just your MOS, but you're carrying a rifle and doing that job?
We got there and we had someone had, I don't know how it happened, but we carried 81 millimeter mortars. Somehow artillery had 120s and we got them, and so we set them up one time and fired, and it became quickly obvious that, just to the amount of like CAS, close air support, and you have to do so much deconfliction.
Yeah.
And in Afghanistan, that's fine because there's not really anything out there. But like if you're in Ramadi, there's stuff everywhere. You're not going to be shooting mortars. So we became, we had gun trucks. And so we became like mounted infantrymen that just kind of drove around shooting things up and whatever. So turned out pretty cool.
Dang. So are you there for over a year?
No, I think we were there for about 8 months. There was I don't really know what happened, but something happened where somebody pissed somebody off, and we left early than we were supposed to, which was cool for me. And I was like, oh, that's awesome.
You had a good run. It was like,
yeah,
been here, seen it.
All right.
Yeah.
Peace out.
Man. What did you take away from that deployment? Were you like, hey, I'm getting out as soon as I can, or you like, hey, I'm staying in, or what lessons did you take away from that deployment?
That deployment was really weird. That was like the first time you get shot at. Like for me, at least, we were ambushed in Ramadi, hit an IED. Everything was like, it was chaos. I'd never been shot at before. And, you start taking fire and suddenly like, I'm thinking I'm having a heart attack. I was like, what? You're supposed to be all cool under combat. And like, this is scary as shit. And, so for me, it was one of those things, like when I got back, I actually got promoted to sergeant in Ireland on the way back. So I went from being a Joe to an NCO, like, I actually didn't even have to go to a board. They had since we were out on an operation, I guess they just put my packet in and whatever. And so that was kind of like humbling and eye-opening that they thought I could be an NCO that I'd only been in the Army. I'd come in as a specialist, but I'd only been in for 18 months. Yeah. So that training became one of those things where you see how quickly the worst thing in the world can happen. And so that was one thing, is like, I gotta, I am a mortarman, I might as well like it, or at least get good at it. And so that's what I took away from that. And Iraq was just fascinating for me. Such an ancient civilization, just so much evil there. And in retrospect, it's strange how easy people forget like how and why we were there. And Afghanistan's a little more so, but there was a lot of things when I later began to write, there were a lot of unanswered questions that kind of found their way into the books.
Yeah. No, it's going to be very therapeutic to explore them through the medium of popular fiction.
Yeah.
What's when you get back, that you're going to turn around and go to Afghanistan? You're on some sort of another cycle, or what happens next?
Well, we got back and the Army was doing this thing where they're like, we need more people to be able to deploy, but we don't actually have more people. So what we're going to do is we're going to create another battalion. And so back then it was 3 battalions to a brigade. And so they took 1 battalion from each brigade and made a brand new brigade. And you're supposed to be home for like a year, but since we were brand new and we didn't have any dwell time, is what it was called. They're like,
dwell time. I haven't thought about that in a while. Dwell time. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know where that came from, but yeah, I think that's what it was called.
I think you're right.
You had to be home a certain amount of time. And they're like, well, these guys haven't gone anywhere because they're not into 504. They're now in the 508.
That's right. Then they just played numbers games with it and had waivers
Yeah.
and this and that. And yeah, it didn't really work out.
So it was immediately we go like full on into training cycle. I had to go to advanced mortar leader course in Benning, came back. We went to JRTC in Louisiana, and then it was off
cool
to
spot.
Afghanistan.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good spot. They have some cool training facilities out there. At least they did anyway. I'm sure that hopefully they're better now, but they're awesome even back in the day. How was Afghanistan? Did you know what you were doing? Did you know exactly where you were going, what your mission was going to be? Or was it kind of like, hey, you're going there, you're going to be in this area, this province or at this outstation, or what was that like?
Well, we went there and Iraq was popping off. The surge was kind of beginning to happen, and they had my understanding is they had overbooked Afghanistan. So they had one more battalion than they actually needed. And right then it was pretty quiet. We got there in the winter, you know how it is, like nobody's fighting really in the winter. And so they decided like they couldn't, I guess, send us home. So they decided to make us what the first tactical theater response force. And they sent us down to Kandahar. And my understanding, the way it worked was that any ISAF commander that was having trouble could basically be like, we want those dudes. And they would get, I guess we had a bigger budget and all the assets. So the first thing that happened was the British were having a lot of trouble in the Helmand, specifically the Sangin River Valley. And the entire battalion went like to the Sangin River Valley. And at this time they had split. There's usually 4 mortar squads in what they call a section. So they split us in half, and my squad and another gun, we were attached to the scout platoon, and we spent the entire deployment with those guys, just basically recon by fire is what we did. It was pretty awesome, but
like go out and make contact.
Yeah, like it totally went against doctrine, but literally we learned right away is they would set up kind of an ambush. We would move into the high ground and set up mortar tubes so that we were kind of this, hey, look at those idiots. And the proof of concept happened on accident. We were in the Sangin, and there was an SF team that had gotten in trouble. They'd gotten bogged down in some of the poppy fields. And so we had been supporting them from across the river, and we wanted to move, I think it was down Highway 1 to get into like a little better position. We crossed the river. We pulled up in this house, and I remember being pissed at our platoon sergeant because I'm like, dude, the fight's way over there. Why we got to be right here? And then all of a sudden you started getting this really weird atmosphere, seeing all these people moving around. It turned out later that the house that we had pulled up into was the regional commander for the Taliban.
Wow.
And he thought we were there for him.
Yeah.
So he's on the radio calling everybody. And we ended up having like an 8 or 9 hour firefight. It was pretty crazy getting shooting the mortars literally almost straight up. Dang. Charge 1, charge 0. They ended up having to call in a couple F-16s to drop 500 pounders, danger close, and ran out of ammo. So we were shooting British ammo, and we actually got to leave the Sangin early because we had shot all the mortar rounds that they had in that area.
Where did the British ammo come from? Were you with British troops, or did they have like a stockpile somewhere?
Well, the Brits, I guess, were in charge. Well, they were in charge of that area. So they just set up Fob Robinson, and their biggest resupply base, what I think was called Bastion. And were you down in that area?
I was up farther. Yeah, I was about Bagram and Ghazni, that area.
Oh, those are fun. So we basically, the Brits and the Americans and the Israelis, the 81 millimeter mortar system is like a mixed design. So they all shoot the same round. They just have different what they call cheese charges, which are propellants. So we had 4, and I think they had 6.
Okay.
So we knew they would shoot the tube, and we're like, dude, just load them and speedball them. So they did, kicked them out. And then the Swedish used they come with a little charge wheel to just figure out the elevation. But we shot all those, and then we came back and did a little more stuff down south. And then we got sent up to Nangarhar and spent 2 or 3 months up in the Tora Boras.
Wow.
Hating life.
Dang, where'd you operate out of up there?
Out of the mountains. Like we were stationed in Jalalabad, but I don't know what really happened at the time. I don't think this is classified anymore. Someone had thought they saw bin Laden up in the mountains. And so guys from SEAL Team 6, which I didn't know that's who they are. They called them Task Force Blue or Blue SEALs. I just remember these guys showed up at the chow hall looking like Moses, like Charlton Heston from like the 10 Commandments, like hair all swayed back. And I'm like, who are those dudes? And, they went in there, and I guess it was a dry hole, but you got to hear them just destroying it. And we went up into the mountains and just cleared the couple valleys we were going through and then came back down. But
so you moved around that deployment. That's pretty good. You got a lot of different areas you got to see.
I think we saw every part of Afghanistan except I guess there's a desert to the west. I guess we didn't go there, but we went to the Kornagol after to relieve the guys at Faber Strepo.
Oh wow.
We were literally just playing, firefighters. We went and helped the Dutch up in I can't remember where they were, but the Dutch and the Australian SAS were having some problems. It might have been Coast. I don't remember, but went helped the 173rd again when they were at might have been Ghazni when they had the farmhouse incident. And so, we went every place that they were acting up.
So that's a busy deployment. How long were you there?
Yeah, it was 15 months.
15 months?
Yeah, we got,
dang.
That's when the surge kind of stop movement. Everybody got extended in the real army.
Were you like, what happened to that dwell time thing I heard about?
Yeah, it was like, I didn't even get to stay home. And now I'm getting freaking. And they told us on Thanksgiving. I remember. I was like, this is the worst Thanksgiving.
That you're getting extended? Like you thought you were
we were in Ghazni, and they said there was a mission to go get some missionaries, I think, that were in the city. They went out there, and we provided a little security, came back, and they're like, oh, by the way, you're also getting extended. And
that is brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, I put it in the first book, so I don't remember the name right now, but I looked up to make sure I got the right unit in there. But I remember when I was in Iraq in 2004, I want to say, that an Army unit, man, they thought they were going home. It was like the 1 year mark, and they thought they were going home. Guys had already flown back. I think a lot of them, they went to a few different places, I believe, but a lot of them went to Alaska, was from Alaska, I think. So they'd already sent that, I forget what you call it, the advance party, I guess, or the reverse advance party, whatever, back home to prepare to have everybody else follow on after that and just prep everything and all that. So they'd already sent those guys back. Then they were at the airfield, and they get word that, hey, you're extended by like 4 months, I think it was. Like, that's pretty brutal. Like, couldn't you guys thought of this a little bit earlier? Like, and some of those guys, I think, came back, and they ended up not making it. So they'd already gone home, seen their families. They had to go back for another 4 months, and then some of them didn't make it. Very brutal.
It makes you wonder, like, who is in charge of that circus sometimes.
Yeah. And, once again, zero accountability across the board for 20 years. Nobody relieved. Even today, the IG report on the withdrawal from Afghanistan was released, I think this morning. So I don't know if it's unclassified or if it's like parts are redacted or if there's a version for citizens or whatever. I don't know. I haven't seen it yet, but I saw that it was released this morning. And the headline I saw said it was an honest assessment of the withdrawal. And I think they'll go in front of Congress and answer questions and all that sort of thing. But my goodness.
Everybody will be fine. It's like, you read the Afghanistan papers.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's just
Craig
kind of
Whitlock.
like, that's a awesome gut punch. And
Craig Whitlock is awesome. Afghanistan Papers, for those who have not read it, should pick it up. He was on the podcast
you have to read it.
Last year, and we had a great conversation about that. But 2 Freedom of Information Act request lawsuits against the federal government to release these transcripts of interviews that they conducted on people coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. And essentially what happened was they got these documents declassified or released to the public, And then what Craig Whitlock did was juxtapose it to what they were saying in front of Congress. So you have this general in front of Congress saying the exact same things the guy before him said, which were, we're making progress. All we need is a little more money, some more budget, some more time. And then he juxtaposes that with what he said in private in conversations that he thought were going to remain classified. And it was 180 out. And it's all of those senior level leaders, for the most part, said we're making progress in front of Congress, just need more money, more time, more troops. And then privately, when they had come back and gave these classified histories, they had a different assessment. So essentially they were lying to Congress, lying to their troops, and lying to the American people. But anyway.
Yeah, that's what I always thought was like, yeah, we call that a lie.
Yeah.
And if Sergeant Josh Hood had tried that crap, you'd be in the brig making like small rocks out of big rocks.
That's right.
But these guys, and it's the same with this intelligence stuff that's got leaked by this airman in, Massachusetts. Like I was looking through that and I was like, how does some dude, I had a secret clearance, but like there weren't like computers, I guess, as much back then, but like, how does some dude just like go on there and was like, I want to see what the Joint Chiefs of Staff's talking about. Then I'm gonna print it out, and then I'm
Is that what he did?
Put it on the internet.
Yeah, that's bizarre. I haven't had a chance to look into it yet. I want to read everything that he put out and see how he did it. But I haven't had a chance yet. So I've been pretty busy, but I plan on looking into it. Very, very curious about.
There's a book there, I'm telling you.
Well, there's definitely things that are going to make it into a book for sure. There's probably an entire book. You're right, but there's certainly things that'll wind up in one of my next novels. But man, I'm looking forward to reading because I thought I just did a brief headline scan on that stuff. But for some reason, I thought he was like taking pictures of the screen with his phone, like doing screenshots, like just taking it into a place where you're supposed to lock up your phone, But they always say there's monitors to check that stuff. I don't know if every place.
Not there, I guess.
I guess not.
My question is like this dude just like I've never been into like I don't know if it'd be a skiff or whatever it is, but he's just like I'm just gonna print this. And nobody is like, there's nothing on the other end that's like, hey, who's printing this stuff? And does he have access? And then when he walks out, like with a big sheet of paper.
Carrying a stack of papers.
Yeah, don't mind me, guys.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. But I want to read what he put out because all I've seen is the headlines, and the headlines that are saying that the things that you can now read because they're leaked are essentially, once again, 180 out from what the administration has been telling us is going on in Ukraine. So I'm curious to read that when I come up for air here in the next couple weeks. So I'll let it play out and download all those things, print them myself probably, and give them a read. Man, wild. What did you take away from that Afghanistan deployment? Are you, after 15 months over there, are you gung-ho to stay in, or are you like, I am out of this outfit?
I was pretty done at that point. And
how about the guys you were with? How about the guys you were with? Were they kind of the same mindset? Like, hey, 15 months is enough, or were some guys like gung-ho to stay in and come back and keep getting after it?
Well, the senior guys like me, we were stop loss. So I was already supposed to be out of the military.
Oh, wow.
And I was still in Afghanistan for another however many months, like 6-7 months. And so.
And for those listening, stop loss is you can get out, but by your contract and by your time, but military says negative. We're just keeping you.
Yeah, you didn't read your contract well enough. At the very bottom, it says
some very fine print.
Signing. So if you sign up for 4 years or 3 years or 2 years, you're actually signing up for a total of 8 years.
Or however much we tell you under the stop loss program.
Right. And so the defining moment for me is we went to this little tiny fob. I think it was called Methalom. And the people in this unit were, the lowest rank was an E5.
Yeah.
And they all had different combat patches, and they were the saltiest people I'd ever seen. Like 0 F's given, and it's like they didn't care. And I'm like, who are these dudes?
Yeah.
Why is there so much rank, and why is everybody hating life? And they're like, oh, they're from IRR. And I was like, what's IRR? Like, that's when you get out of the Army and they recall you to come right back because you still have time on your contract. And I was like, I don't think that's true. And so I started talking to them, and that's exactly what happened. These guys all of them hadn't been out of the Army 3-4 months. Some of them had just gotten back from Iraq, got out of the Army, and they're like, we need more dudes.
So you
So
change your number immediately.
right. They just, come on, let's go, buddies.
Yeah. Crank caller. Who's this? Who's this? Crank caller.
Yeah.
Crank caller.
You're like, you're like, is this a joke?
Yeah.
And they're like, no, it's not a joke. And apparently, I mean, people would say I'd run or whatever, but you don't really have a choice. You're going to go to jail. You're going to be whatever. That's not who.
Right.
Most Americans in that position would be like, this sucks. Here we go again.
Yeah.
And, but I wanted nothing to do with that. So I was like, maybe this war's never going to end. And I don't really want to come back here right away. So I got out and, made a deal with the National Guard where they would cut my IR time in half, and I could not deploy. While I was doing that, I was trying to get on the sheriff's department, and then it turned out that like there was some PTSD, undiagnosed things that started happening. Like I came back and signed into this unit. National Guard's pretty chill. But they were immediately like, we're going to Iraq. And I'm like, I don't know what this we stuff is. I got a contract. I'm like, well, you didn't read that contract either, because at the very bottom it says that, whatever. So long story short, we're getting ready to kind of get these trucks ready. And I happened to just start this Humvee. And there was just something, one of my good friends was killed in a Humvee, hit an IED. There was something, I guess, about that diesel smell that just like, put me in this. I thought I was having a heart attack. I actually never really told this story, but started kind of like throwing up. Didn't know what was going on. Thought I was having a heart attack. Didn't realize it was a panic attack. One of the senior dudes there was like, "Dude, are you okay? Did you eat something?" I'm like, "No, I don't." I started Humvee, and so that they basically sent me to the VA and got me checked out. And they're like, "Oh, you have PTSD," and so my time in the Guard was shortened even more than I thought it was. I ended up getting a medical discharge for that. And I don't know, it was entered the sheriff's department, and that was kind of like the abrupt end to my time in the military. So, yeah, back then PTSD wasn't really talked about.
Did the sheriff's department have questions about that, or was that just like totally separate things?
Yeah, I was like, I'm not telling these guys, because I was kind of in denial. I was like, I don't have that. Only people who are weak have that type stuff. And I've later matured and learned and, kind of worked through those things. But back then, that was kind of like a ego, the hit to your ego is like, what do you mean I'm not fit enough to be in the National Guard? Like, do I really suck? And so it worked out. Went to the sheriff's department. And because my military was allowed to go try out for SWAT early, we have actually 2 full-time Tier 1 SWAT teams here in Memphis, and spent, I guess, the next 9 years doing that.
Dang, you've been doing that for a while. How have you dealt with the post-traumatic stress stuff? Have you managed that? Have you dealt with that?
Originally, when I went there and to the VA, they gave me this like paper sack full of meds. They're like, you have PTSD, take this. And I'm looking at, go home, and it's like, you take one to go. It was, I don't even know, like, I didn't take any of it, but it was like, I guess, all types of just like pharmaceuticals, something to take, like a Valium if you're feeling crappy during the day, like an antidepressant, whatever. And so they didn't even ask, like, what's your thoughts on prescription pills? Are you allergic? There's literally, and there's no supervision. I mean, this was back in 2009, I think.
Still,
but it was
still
like,
been at war for 8 years,
Well, I mean, you look at some of this stuff, and some of that stuff was like, turns out was pretty dangerous.
Yeah.
Like my wife's a nurse, and, she's, we talk about it later, and there were drug interactions between some of these things. There's like, you shouldn't just really hand anybody like a 90 count bottle of Valium. Like, you don't know, I could have been like a pillhead and been like, oh, but so I felt it was pretty irresponsible. And
that's how it is across the board. That story is not, unfortunately, it's not unique. It's like, hey, okay, PTSD, here's your bag of pills. Good luck.
Yeah. And, it's sad because I think that we have this suicide epidemic, and that's going along with that. And it's kind of like, you would think the military would kind of have this, hey, you break it, you bought it mentality. And I wouldn't say I had any resentment. The resentment, I guess, didn't come until like, the fall of Afghanistan. Then you start to question why.
Yeah.
Like, why did I do all this? Why did my friends die? Why did all this stuff happen? When like you just kind of throw us and these other people away like we're trash.
Yeah.
And I'm not like, I know a lot of guys who've gone the spectrum where they like start to think negative about the United States. Like, I believe the heart of this country is still strong. I believe in everything that we did. We signed up to do a job. I wasn't under any pasty daydreams of what I was going to do. But I do think you have the right to question the direction, especially when you have kids and you see American policymakers have a tendency to not remember mistakes made. And then 10 years down the road, like, hey, we need to go back to Afghanistan. We need your son to go with us. That's going to be an issue.
Mm-hmm. Oh, man. Yeah. It's, they think in terms of 4-year election cycles, maybe 8 tops. But we neglect to take those lessons and apply them going forward as wisdom time and time again. And then you get the withdrawal the way we saw it there. But that one is like, you don't need any time in the military. You don't need any touch points in the military. You don't need to have read a book on tactics or on strategy or geopolitics or anything to just look at that situation, apply common sense to it, and say, hey, we should probably keep people at Bagram until we get out of here. Why would we put them in this tactically disadvantageous position? I don't know. And then you have senior level officials just recently in a press conference saying it was a success. And meanwhile, there are people they're asking you not to look and believe your own eyes and see planes leaving and people hanging off landing gear and falling to their deaths, and not remembering that babies were thrown over walls and impaled and bleed out in all this concertina wire. But hey, that's a success. Okay. All you need to do is apply a little common sense to that. And they just keep asking us not to believe our own eyes. And it's disheartening and it's disgusting, actually.
Well, we have a history, you look at America from back in the day and this concept of the city on the hill, what we, started out to do, this idea of, everybody comes here together, we'll get better. We work together as, a country, you have that fabric beginning to be torn apart. But what's the most disheartening is this is nothing new. This was done in Vietnam. This is it's like we have a leadership that, and I don't even know if it's 100% the leadership's problem, because as I've grown and matured, I've begun to think to myself, like, we owe it to this country and to ourselves to demand more, not only of our leadership, but also of ourselves, right? We have to, is this acceptable? Like, who are we? Like, when did America become a place where people don't check to see what the facts are, where they don't know about foreign affairs, where they don't know, hey, maybe some of these things make us look like not so great. This isn't who we are. And I think that, for me personally, social media has become like one of those things you have to do kind of if you're trying to promote books. But at the same time, it's kind of strange how my wife and other people, they take that as news, like that's reality. Mm. And I think that if you continue down that path, you begin to, you're a student of history. It's all there. It's all written down.
Yeah.
But people just, I don't understand how they just don't take the time, or maybe it's an arrogance or an ego. I don't know.
Well, there's certainly the accountability side of it. It's like say World War II, we have George Marshall, who's obviously known for the Marshall Plan, rebuilding Europe. But most people don't really think about, when they hear his name, that he put all those people in places, all those names of the generals and admirals that we know today from history books, or that if you haven't studied the history of World War II, you're familiar with, because you've heard it somewhere. And there were other people in those positions at the start of the war, and if they made a mistake or two, he'd give them a second chance. But after that, no, you were out and someone else was moved in that could do the job. Leaders were held accountable back then. And George Marshall did not mess around when it came to accountability. And then something changed. Something changed between Korea and Vietnam, certainly throughout Vietnam, which continues today, whereas failure is rewarded with advancement. And you are moved along, and the next guy comes in, and he doesn't want to do anything that's going to upset his track if he's going to continue on to get that next star and then sit on that board seat at some defense contracting company. So it became an industry. I mean, the military-industrial complex is a real thing. And just like the pill mills we're talking about right here, I mean, that pharmaceutical industry, there's a reason they hand you that bag of pills, and the person handing you that bag of pills probably doesn't even know, but it's all part of this machine. But holding leaders accountable is something that fell by the wayside essentially after World War II, and look what's happened since. So I think a lot of it comes back to that. Navy Federal Credit Union. Navy Federal Credit Union is here to help military members and their families tackle home ownership during this high rate market. With their new no refi rate drop option, if you buy your next home now and mortgage rates drop later, you could lower your rate by paying a low fee instead of refinancing and paying thousands in closing costs. They offer mortgage options with zero down payment, so you don't need to wait years to save. Also, planning any travel this summer? Navy Federal Flagship Credit Card treats members to our highest rewards and premium benefits. Flagship makes it easy to rack up rewards with higher points on travel, including everything from tolls to terminals. Earn a bonus 40,000 points when you spend 4,000 in the first 90 days, plus enjoy a free year of Amazon Prime. At Navy Federal, our members are the mission. Learn more at NavyFederal.org. Federally insured by NCUA, membership required, equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply, loans subject to approval and eligibility requirements. Open to the Armed Forces, the DoD, veterans, and their families. As of 5/1/2023, the rates for Flagship are 14.74% to 18%. Based on credit worthiness. ATM fees for cash advances are up to $1 at non-Navy Federal ATMs, a $49 annual fee for Visa Signature Flagship rewards. NavyFederal.org. But Sheriff's Department, did you know you were going to go for the Sheriff's Department while you were still in, or was that something you wanted to do after your time in the military, or how did that?
I did not. When I got out in 2008, the economy was gone, and you don't really know too much about the economy being in the military, or especially if you're overseas. And I had an English degree from college, so there wasn't much I could do. And I was like, well, some type of stability. Like, they're always going to need cops, they're always going to need garbage men, they're always going to need something like that. And like, I've got this skill set, and it seems to work. And so I kind of got into that. That way, I got lucky. In that, that opportunity was there. I got to learn a lot of stuff that I didn't. When you're in the military, when you're in the Army or the 82nd, there's a lot of things you do that are just, I don't even know how they happen. Like, you'd be cleaning your weapons. Oh yeah, we're bored. Go clean your weapons. And literally, you'd sit there and you look at some of these weapons. I look back at it now, it's terrifying. Like, there's no bluing on the weapon. Like, you're looking at the bolts, you're looking at the chambers, and like these things are all just like shot out. No one's bore scoped and pulled over anything. And like, that's what cleaning is. You're using metal tools on a piece of metal, and like that bluing was there for a reason. And luckily in SWAT, I got a much more intensive understanding of everything. Shooting, rifles, ballistics. Got to go down to Shaw's, which I think they call
Mid-South Institute of Self-Defense. Yep.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's not far from us. A lot of the guys that were on our team, the older dudes, were instructors there at sometimes. And so we got to go train there. We got to go to Tier 1. We got to go to Darcy.
Nice.
There's like this hub of all these places. Got to, because at that time, like, SEAL Team 6 was doing, I think, Green Team down at Shaw's, and then it was mainly like an SF, like special operations thing, where it kind of started off as police, but you get to learn new concepts that they were using over there, and learn to shoot pistols learn what different bullets, calibers, etc. And I think that really helped my writing. You get a lot deeper understanding of CQB and stuff.
Yeah. How long did it take for you to get on the SWAT team? Was there any training? Do you have to go to, for a sheriff's department? Do you have do you have to do posts or anything, or what do you do to get on that?
Yeah, you go through the initial hiring process. They, do your background check, etc. And then you go through the boot camp, like the training academy is what they call it. And I don't remember exactly how long it was, but it was a couple months. And, you learn, most of it's, like you said, post requirements. You have to have this much time. So you learn a lot about law and this other dumb stuff, and you march around, and then you learn how to shoot. And then most everybody ends up going to patrol. And so in there, they put you on a shift. You have like a FTO, which is a field training officer, and you just ride around in a car, learning kind of how to be a cop. And really quickly, I was like, this, pushing lead, what they call it, just driving around, that's not for me. I was on what they call Baker shift, which is like the mid kind of shift. And so people are coming home from work, finding their stuff's broken into, guys, so it was like, they call it a turbo shift. So you're just riding around, writing reports, doing all this stuff. And one day I just happened to see the SWAT team like out there fast roping out of a helicopter. And I was like, dude, I want to do that.
Yeah.
And so was able to apply. And because of my military experience, usually have to be on for like 2 years, was able to kind of fast track that, went to the tryout, which kind of sucked. And then entered the actual, what they call SWAT school, which was about 7 or 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And the guys there based like the first phase off of that Discovery Buds channel. So it was pretty much exactly the same. You had your log, you had all your stuff. The only thing we didn't have were those boats, but it was like, this is terrible. But
what was, once you got on the team, what was your first do you do like no knock warrants, stack on the door, go in, do a serve a warrant, whatever you're doing? What was your first experience of going into a kind of an unknown situation, or I don't know, barricaded shooter, hostage situation, whatever it was? What was that first one like?
Well, my first call out happened. That's what they call them. Literally the day we had to get sprayed with, they use a like a regular CS mace, and then they use this other stuff called Top Cop, which is terrible. But they spray you with it, and like you're supposed to go home because like OC spray will wear off pretty quick. It might make you throw up the gas, but like this other stuff, I don't know what it had in it, but it's like, feels like your face is on fire. They open up the fire hydrant, you're scrubbing yourself, but you're supposed to go home. So I head home, and on the way, at this point I had to take home Tahoe or the truck that they had, and you got all your gear in the back. Nice. And you got like a cell phone or a beeper or whatever it was. And we got a call out where a guy who was actually a Serbian national holding his wife hostage.
Wow.
And so I'm like, I'm not really operational, but I go back and they put me with the snipers. We're overwatching.
You can't see, house. But you have the sniper.
Yeah, I'm like, what am I supposed to do? And so we're up in this attic, and it's really hot, and so the OC crystals and everything start reactivating, and they're like,
my gosh.
Hey, you need to watch. I'm like, I can't see, my eyes on fire.
You're in an attic of another private residence, like across the street or something?
Yeah, like across the street, and they're on the rifles.
And what do you do? Just knock on the door and say, excuse us, we need to use your attic. Is it okay? Or do you just use the attic?
Well, they, once they have a call out, they basically set up a perimeter. So you got patrol officers setting up perimeter, and the idea is you want to evacuate the houses to the left and the right and within any line of sight and everything. And back then we did things a little bit different. We weren't explosive breaching yet. We weren't doing some other stuff. So it was kind of like, it looked cool to me, but it was like some Keystone Cops crap with, guy sneaks around the house and knocks the meter off the house, so you'll cut the power, and then, all this stuff. And then they bring a pumper in, and they're pumping, water, like a fire. Like apparently some fire trucks can pump hot water. Huh. So they're pumping that in there because the guy's throwing gasoline around the house. Is nuts. They ended up having to shoot the dude. Luckily, it wasn't one of the snipers because I couldn't see anything. And then the next call out was right after graduation. We went and hit a club that the Mexican mafia was using for muling drugs and stuff. We drove out there, and it was straight dynamic back then. It was drive up, ram the door, and that's my job. Ram the door, they'd go in a stack, and just that we used to call rush the flush. They're just trying to like get in real quick, not very tactical at all. And then as we began to progress, our tactics got a little more savvy. We started using explosive breaching a lot, porting, trying to clear as much, try to call out. Like a lot of people think that's like wuss stuff, but it's like, why go in if they'll come out?
Yeah.
And
what were you guys using? Do you have ARs?
Yeah, we had at the time we had L&Ts, the old monolithic rail one that was like super heavy. And
what was your pistol?
We were using the SIG. I always get it messed up. Is it the 229, the big one, or is it 226?
226 be the 9mm. Okay, nice. And then
we had
what
one's like kind of the smaller one.
Okay, there were 228 back in the day, but those were probably not even around back then. We had the 226, 228, 239. Those are the ones that we ended up using downrange, kind of like the family of 9mm.
Yeah, it's like the double single, and it was this one. I think it was like the first iteration of the Legion kind of thing. Yeah, they were. I mean, it wasn't the cool 320s that they have now, but they were a great pistol. Did what they were supposed to, reliable, everything. Nice. Now they're making amazing pistols. That new Legion and the Spectre Comp. It's a tack driver.
Yeah, I think some cool stuff. What shotguns do you guys use, and did you use them just for breaching?
We had we had a bunch of stuff. We had like the Benelli M2s. I carry as one of the breachers. I carried the little master key, the cutoff. Was it 1170 or
1100 Remington?
Yeah. Just same thing I carried in Iraq. It was just like a little pump shotgun. You just if you needed to go.
Then it was the 870 probably if it's a pump.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Yeah. They all run together, So be able to. So for breaching, just interior, exterior doors, carried that. We had some of the old, the MP5s, which are cool, but
did you use them still?
Yeah, we had a couple of them. It's kind of that thing where they're like, oh, everybody in the military is using the ARs, so like, why would we use 9mm? And we had them in 9 and I believe 40. Yeah, and I was like, why not? These things are awesome. But that wasn't the cool, gear. Kind of get this Gucci gear mentality where everybody wants like the cool stuff. And I guess I thought the MP5s were awesome.
Yeah. We did our first post 9/11 deployment, still with them, doing shipboarding operations with them, but then everything switched to ARs later.
Yeah, we had the old chalker slings and everything.
Oh, nice.
Like those are probably worth money now.
Probably. Yeah. Dang it. Mine's in a bag that went to a friend's house, and then he got divorced, and all my stuff. I don't like thinking. I don't like talking about it. I don't even like talking about it. But I remember the chalker sling. I remember that, man. Oh gosh, it was probably one of those bags. Ugh. All right, I'm gonna put that aside. So how long did you do that before you started writing? Do you start writing while you're doing this?
I started writing while I was doing that, and oddly enough, kind of circling back to my dad, I'd always known that I was going to be a writer, kind of like he always knew that he wanted to be an artist, but it was just something, my mom used to joke and say, like, the only writers who make money are those who write ransom notes. So you're going to have to get a real job, And so when I was in the Army, I had a team leader, and they kind of made fun of me and hazed me when I came in, because I came in as a specialist because of college, and they're like, they found out I was an English major, wanted to be a writer, and they're like, who are you, Bill Shakespeare, and whatever. But as it happens, you deploy with these guys, you become friends, and we'd talk about movies and books and things like that. Then literally one day out of the blue, I get a call, unknown number from like Salt Lake City. I answer it, and the guy's name was Jody. He's like, hey man, what's up? I'm like, dude, what's going on? And he had, long story short, he just basically said, dude, I just got a degree in English, and I just published my first book. It wasn't through a big five or anything, but he had published a book. I'm like, dude, you were like barely literate. You kidding me? And he's like, dude, look it up. So I looked it up on Amazon, sure enough, and like that hit me kind of like a ton of bricks, because at that moment I realized, you've been running from this, you want to do it. I guess maybe you're scared, you're not, whatever. But this guy, like, he took that dream from talking to you, and then he just went and executed. So literally, I got off the phone, I went upstairs, I grabbed my old laptop that I'd had in Afghanistan, and I started what would become Clear by Fire, my first book, and got that finished. Was rejected about 82 times by agents, and then
how did you do that? Did you go through that book of agents and start sending them out, or query letters?
Yeah, back then, they had I'll say back then, this was like 2015, but they had this, what was it? This is like a phone book, and it was like all the agents.
It's like the year, whatever year it was, 2018,
yeah, it was like the writer's
book of agents, yeah.
And so you just go through and you're like, this guy kind of, like, I didn't know about genres or anything. I thought they were action adventure. I knew I wanted to be a military type book. So I start kind of like looking at guys who are out there, Clancy, Vince Flynn. I'm trying to think of who else was out there, but maybe Mark Graney was kind of, he might've been writing back then. But I mean, you don't really know anything going into it. So you kind of look through here. Brad Thor, I'm sure he was. You find the guys like, okay, this guy's in this genre and these agents represent it. So you just make this list and then you just start emailing these query letters out. And like I said, it was like 82 rejections. And odd thing was that I remember being like, maybe this book sucks. Maybe I should just do something else. And I was like, thinking back to Afghanistan, one day you're in Afghanistan, then you get on this freedom bird, you fly home, and then like, just like that, your entire world changes. You're now back in the States. It's like, maybe you have faith in what it is. You think it's a good book. Like whatever. I don't care. It'll kill me. I'll put 1,000 rejections. I don't care. One day somebody's going to say yes. So the next day, literally flipped the list, started back over at the beginning. And the first guy I sent out, I think like in batches of 5 or 6, first guy that rejected me, went out to him. He actually like read it, signed me, and sold 2 books to Touchstone, which is now I think owned by Atria, within the span of like 2 weeks. And it's that was one of those lessons where, it always gets darkest before the dawn. But if you stop right there, you never know what, what lives on the other side of a no.
Nice. So you get this one, first one publishes, gets out there. You do the second one.
Yeah. Then I wrote Warning Order. It's kind of like, how it is. It's kind of, you can write a great book or what you think is a great book. People can like it and it just doesn't sell. Something just doesn't work. And it was one of those things, the second book comes out, and then I think Touchstone got bought or kind of like swallowed by Atria, which was Simon & Schuster. So there was basically like, nobody wanted another one of those books. And kind of had to do some ghostwriting to kind of get back in the game, because typically my understanding is they look at numbers and they're like, you didn't sell that many, whatever. Like, it's kind of hard to get that second bite at the apple sometimes. Did some ghostwriting, and then actually the first time I met you was at BoucherCon. Yep. And I also met Tom Colgan there. Yep. And
that's you met Tom.
And then Tom was the one who asked me on that trip, basically, he just said, hey, don't get into anything. I might have something for you. I'm like, okay. And a week later, he called about the Ludlum and the Treadstone.
Dude, that is awesome. People ask me all the time, how do you find an agent? How do you get published? And I tell people that, hey, go to BoucherCon, go to Thriller Fest.
Yeah.
Like, it's not going to hurt to go to these places. And like, if you weren't there, if you're like, I don't think I'm going to go to BoucherCon this year, I'll wait for, the next one, or I'm kind of busy right now or whatever. Hey, that meeting with Tom Colgan might not happen, and Treadstone and everything else might not have happened. I mean, that you got to be there. And even if you don't really know that you need to be there, going there and just kind of soaking it in will make you realize like, oh, okay, now I see how important this is, to be at these places, get to understand a little more about the industry, understand about the agents and the publishing process and the editors and the imprints and how all this ecosystem works together, just by being there and striking up a conversation, asking a question of a panel where you have these authors up there for 45 minutes or whatever it is, giving a little talk and then answering questions, for days, for like 3 days. So yeah, it does not hurt to go to those things if you are an aspiring author. And that worked. That's awesome that you met Tom there.
Yeah. And, I've used this situation, and because I'd gotten a hold of an advanced copy of your book, but during BoucherCon, your book hadn't come out yet.
Let's see. When was that one? Yeah. The first one was out. Cause what year was this? This is 2018. Oh, it's 17?
I believe so.
I think it was 18.
Okay.
I don't know. Anyway, regardless.
Well, and a lot of people say, well, I don't have this or I don't have that. I don't have a book out. I don't have a book done. And my memory could be off, but I remember like your book was in production, but it wasn't released yet. Maybe it was, and I could be wrong, but I was like, well, Jack was there and he was talking, about his book that wasn't out yet.
First one was out. Yeah,
work.
First one was out.
Okay.
Second one was had not come out yet. So this is, I forget what time of year this was. It was either
this was like in August, or it was hot. I just remember that.
Was it August 2018? So book had been out for a few months, I think.
All right. Well, either way, still, it's like you don't have to be like a Lee Child or somebody else to begin to make that ripple. You're getting out there. And I don't know why I thought that. I'll have to look it up and I'll get back to you, because I thought that it was special because, maybe it hadn't been out long enough to get all this momentum, but you were still there doing the work. Mm-hmm. You were still there meeting people. You were still there, make the networking, understanding how this works, getting your name out, because a lot of people think that it's 100% the book. But I've begun to learn, from watching you and others, is like the author and the book, they're almost trying to live vicariously through you. And like those things go hand in hand. And back in the day, it was like an author could just sit away in his room and just type away and put it out and, oh, he's a master. But the world, that doesn't work that way anymore, and I think you have kind of put this spotlight on that there's really not that much wiggle room between what you are and what you're writing about, and how many other ways can that spin off.
Yeah, people want today, really since I'd say by about 2000, 2005 for sure, want to know more about that author and where this stuff comes from, because you can do that with in other industries, with other products, and you can get to know that person behind whatever that widget might be. And in our case, it's books, and the book has to be the best it can possibly be. But then people have to know it exists, because there are a lot of choices out there, and you're also competing with every app, every social media platform, every streaming service, along with all the more traditional legacy types of entertainment like movies and other books. So having that connection with an audience is important today with the readership, I think. And I realized that just by looking at the space, like I look at the battlefield, gaps in the enemy's defenses, capitalizing on momentum, adapting faster than your enemy, and just looking at the publishing space and applying some common sense to it, like we talked about earlier, and realizing that, hey, you can do these things today that you couldn't or have done in 1985, and they probably wouldn't have done for a lot of authors in 1985, even if they had existed. It was probably better for a lot of authors to not be out there and to just be typing away. That's what I thought before. Like that was part of the appeal growing up, because I'm growing up in the 80s, reading all these books in the 90s, and you're like, wow, I could just live in a cabin and write and send it to New York and then start the next one. Like that's part of the appeal. But then, of course, when I come of age in the publishing industry, that's not how it is anymore, unless you're an outlier. I'm sure there are outliers here and there that can still, there's always outliers in any profession, in any industry. But yeah, got to be in there doing the job. First, making sure the book's the best it can possibly be, that product, that widget is the best it can possibly be. But then, how do you connect with that audience? How do you connect with that reader? How do you connect with other products, with that consumer, clientele, whatever it might be? So yeah, but it's fun. It's fun because you're learning new things and you're adapting to an ever-changing environment. So that's just what I did on the battlefield, although I got to handle problems a little more violently and aggressively. But you can still do that in the pages of a thriller.
Right.
You just get a little more time to figure things out. And if you mess it up, guess what? No one's going home in a body bag. So you can sleep on it. You can figure it out. You can go back and make a better decision pages back. So yeah, man. So I love it. But that was a great conference. BoucherCon was amazing. That was Florida. St. Petersburg, right? St. Petersburg, Florida?
I believe so, yeah.
So that was fantastic. It was so much fun. And then I love going to BoucherCon and Thriller Fest. I'll be there, Thriller Fest again this year. I'm a spotlight guest, but when they asked me to do it, I didn't realize that it was like 2 years ago that they asked me, and I'm like, oh, absolutely, yeah, early June, okay, or I don't even know if they had the date back then, but I was like, yeah, absolutely, thank you, such an honor. And then just a couple months ago, I was like, wait, when's my daughter's graduation from high school? I'm like, oh, it's the exact same day that I was supposed to be doing this thing on Friday at Thriller Fest. And so I called David Brown, publicist at Simon & Schuster. I'm like, oh, can we push things to Saturday? And so I'll take a red eye out on Friday after graduation, show up on Saturday morning and go right to the event and do the interview and then the thing at the night or whatever. But anyway, always go. But point being, they're fun events.
I don't understand how you do it. It's like
I'm exhausted.
Like, how does the guy not sleep? Because, you know, behind all of that, what nobody, maybe only writers see is like all this energy you're putting out. You still have to be thinking about that next book. You know, you still have to be thinking about the book of the future. And like, people think it's kind of easy, but I think we've talked about it before. Like, especially if you come from the military and you're writing these books, like, once you kind of get that low hanging fruit, you're starting to drill really deep into yourself. And that last Treadstone book I wrote was actually set in, you know, Afghanistan, right up to the fall of Kabul. And, you know, I've had issues with deadlines, and people are like, oh, I'll just write words. And, you know, you have your standard of what you know is good. And sometimes, like, you know, art just takes its own time to manifest, and I feel like I'm cheating my readers. If I would love to turn it in early, but if it's bad, you know, they're spending good money on this. Like, these books aren't cheap. And, but you start to drill into certain things and it takes you places that you didn't expect. And you're like, look, this story that was going this way is now going this way. It's so much better, but I just need a little more time. And it's like, sometimes that's hard. Especially, I can't imagine for you.
Well, I'm very fortunate that my deadlines, or how do you say, soft deadlines, I guess is the best way to put it. So ever thankful to Emily Bessler and the crew over at Simon & Schuster, Emily Bessler Books, for giving me that leeway, because sometimes it does take a little longer. Sometimes that book you thought was going to be, it's probably going to end up being about 115,000 words, 120,000 probably tops based on my outline and now my previous experience writing these other books. Guess what? This last one, I passed 100, I passed 115, I passed 125, passed 130, and that's just what the story was taking. So it's just how it goes. But you're right, art, you can't, like, it's tough. You can't be like, my painting will be done on this day. I mean, maybe some people can, but I'm very fortunate that I don't really think of it in terms of that. I just know I need to get it done, and I'm always working on getting more effective and efficient with my time, especially now that there are more demands on it. So I'm trying to get better at that, so I'm not running around like a crazy man all the time. That's not working out so well as of today, but I'm working on that for the future. So that's just how it goes, though.
I've started using this app called Dragon Anywhere, I think. So it goes on your phone, and it's a transcription app. Like, I've tried using the notes on my phone and etc., but it'll time out. This one won't time out, and it's pretty good. Like, you know, you just have to edit, but like, somehow thoughts come to me when I'm driving, or if I'm at my son's t-ball practice or whatever. And I read somewhere that the average human speaks 10,000 words a day.
Oh yeah.
And so if you just sit there and, like, if I just get a percentage of that, you know, you're able to be productive in places that you wouldn't normally be productive. Because I think the gold comes from that kind of stream of consciousness thought, as opposed to like, oh, I'm sitting here like trying to be writerly. Sometimes the flow doesn't come out. But when you're just like, I got to get this down, you go back, you look at it, man, that it needs some polishing, but that's good.
Oh, nice. I downloaded those apps. There was like a family of them, I think. There was like a few of them, and they were each part of that dragon thing. And I was like, I want to say it was late 2018, and I never used them. So I send myself emails though. Like last night I was coming back from Montana, and I pulled over and sent myself an email that just has notes go to it. So I'll send myself something. I'll pull over real quick, and I'm like, okay, boom, send it. So I find that's working out. Because I've tried the notes also on my phone, and then I'm just like, where was that? What did I do? Did I write it somewhere? Did I put it in a note that I now can't find? Or what? Is it in the cloud?
Yeah, I've got an old school voice recorder that I use a lot. And,
my wife got me one, and I didn't end up using it.
Yeah, it takes a little time, like, because you read it back and you're like, oh, type in as fast as you can, and you got to back it up. But it's really good for those situations where you always kind of know where it is.
Yeah.
And for me, that has helped because sometimes I only need that spark, I get stuck and I just need a spark. And then it's like, oh, here I am. You get these ideas. And I don't know, sometimes sitting there at a computer or typing something, I like to write longhand because I feel sometimes I think sitting in front of a computer, you have this, for me, it looks like a blank screen, looks like a mirror. And so it's mirroring what I'm not doing. And
I'm like, great. Thanks for telling me that. Now I'm going to think about it later this afternoon when I sit down to write. Dang it.
Well, the cool thing is you can change that thought to be like, it's all about your headspace, right? In this particular thing, it's like, oh, I don't feel like doing it. And you're just like, but I want to do it. And it's like, oh, that changes things and kind of about your perspective, tricking your mind.
Yeah. No, I'm glad I sent myself those emails because I'll look at them and be like, oh, geez, I totally forgot about that. Thank goodness I sent that email because now it's going in this book or whatever it might be. So yeah, that ends up working out pretty well. Got to capture it somehow. But so when Tom Colgan calls you and says, do you want to do Ludlam? What is that like?
I thought he was joking. And I've told this story before. I thought he had called because I didn't know him. I thought maybe he'd got a bunch of numbers and accidentally my number got thrown into the pile. And so I'm like, are you serious? And
for those listening, Tom Colgan is a legendary editor of Mr. Tom Clancy.
That's right. And the funny story is just prior to going to Bauschicon, I don't really know how this happened, but I was invited to Clive Cussler's house. There was a possibility that I could step in and take over one of his series. And as I was literally flying over that negotiation between I think it was Boyd Morrison and him, they fixed it. So I land and it's like, nobody tells me that there's no book idea. So I'm just like hanging out with Clive Cussler.
Wow. In Arizona?
Yeah, at his house for like 3 days. And he was kind of getting older, got to hang out with his wife, and like he had this study back there. And so he's like, let's go talk. And we go into his study and it's got all his books everywhere. And it's got the models from like Sahara and Raise the Titanic. And like, I grew up, that was the guy, I've read all the books, like Dirk Pitt, the 45, everything. That was it for me. And I'm just sitting here like trying to be normal.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So it was crazy. It turned out I didn't get the book, but I guess maybe that my name had gotten thrown into that. Like maybe it was some FOMO or whatever. So somehow my name got back to Tom Colgan because I guess that Penguin and them publish the same thing. And like you said, just being there, showing up, happened. He called me. I said, yeah, I'd really love to try. So I wrote, I think it was like 25 page, like a little tryout.
Oh, wow.
Like they gave me the idea because they had the Bourne thing. And I thought that's what I was like, I'm gonna write Bourne. Like, no. We got this other thing for you. It's called Treadstone. We don't know what it's going to be. Can you figure it out? And just kind of was able to build that.
Yeah.
Submitted it. They enjoyed it. And then it was off to the races. Just
that is awesome. How many of those did you do?
4.
Man, that's pretty awesome. That is really cool to be associated with something so legendary,
It's, it's still a little surreal because I grew up reading Robert Ludlum books and he wasn't alive to talk to. So you're trying to like get in his headspace, but you're also trying to sell a more modern story, but it's like standing on the shoulders of giants. Like I really shouldn't be here. But it worked out well and it was stressful, but I think it kind of pushed me to perform, maybe punch a little higher than my weight.
Nice. And then so you do those 4. Are you writing some other stuff at the same time, or are you dedicated to those 4 while you're doing them?
I was dedicated to those 3. And then on the 4th one, I wrote The Guardian while I was writing Treadstone. And so that's the first one with just my name on it in like 4 years. So. Nice.
That is awesome. So so man, this is awesome. This is so cool that you got this coming out here. June 27th. Is that the right date still?
It is.
Nice.
As far as I know.
Very cool. So where did this idea come from? Because it's not an Army guy, Air Force pararescue here. How did you do that research, and what made you want to explore someone with that background?
Well, for me, towards the end of the Treadstone books, I was writing the last one, you had Afghanistan fall. And so for me, that was really an end of an era, the end of the global war on terrorism that's kind of been at the centerpiece of these military fiction books since it started. And at the same time, you have so many people using SEALs, Delta guys, Marine guys, whatever. And for me, it was always like, how do you think outside of that? Like what, and so PJs, I knew about them. I didn't know as much as when I began to research, but what fascinated me about a PJ is that instead of, they have the capabilities to work on special operations, but they're not primarily direct action guys. They're like medics. So they're there to save people's lives. And so the dichotomy of like having a guy that's trained to save people, putting him in a position where he has to go kind of direct action was interesting. I thought it was like a new type of character, maybe.
Nice. And then so for writing this one, has your process changed over time, or have you stuck kind of with the same kind of process? Mine stayed the same, really, for all these first 6 books. Not saying it won't change in the future, refined maybe a tiny bit, but essentially it's the same process of coming up with the title, coming up with a theme, writing a 1-page executive summary, and then asking myself, is this worth the next year of my life, next year and a half of my life? And then, hey, if someone else were to read this, like if they picked this book up and read the back of it right here, or flipped open the hardcover and read the inside jacket cover, would they be willing to, or would they want to spend time in those pages, time they're never going to get back? And if the answer to that is yes, then okay, I got 2 yeses right there. Bam, I take that 1-page executive summary, turn that into the outline, and then turn that outline into the narrative. But and that's been the way it has been since the beginning. Only difference in the beginning was I had like 6, 7, 8, 9 different executive summaries and had to choose which one to start with. But how's your process evolved over time for this book?
Well, unfortunately, I wasn't near as organized as you were. Like, I think I was more of an organic writer, which some people will call a pantser.
Pantser, yep.
Yeah.
So you're writing by your seat of your pants, if people are wondering what that means.
And it's a terrible idea. I say that to say that you have to have, I'm learning now, you have to have order, you have to have structure if you're going to have any career in this, because with time being of an essence and your family, etc., the issues I would get within deadlines is, I would find the story as I'm writing the story, but oftentimes, like, I would find the story about 100 pages in, and that means those 100 pages, they don't work.
Wow.
Or maybe it was 50, and you can only, what you're doing in essence when you're writing, being a pantser or organic, is you're creating an outline in your first draft. You're just doing it the least efficient way possible. You're writing a book, that doesn't work. And so, like you said, sitting back and taking a structured approach to do with The Guardian, and I've started to do now, is I used to think that, well, if you outline it and you know everything that's going to happen, you're kind of boxed in. But no, what you're doing is you're looking at a map before you get in a car and drive across the United States. Like, what is the most efficient route? Okay, I don't want to go there because of this. So I've begun to do that. And one thing that's kind of developed out of necessity was these ideas of micro chapters. That's what I call them. Where you're writing, and like I would find the difference between an outline and actually writing the book isn't in these big ideas. It's in like these little minutia, these crossing over points where you're like, okay, I got him in Africa and I want him to go to Asia and he's going to do this. He's going to meet this guy and kick this dude's butt. And you're like, okay, how's he get there? Those have been the parts that that'll stop you. And you're like, okay, I got to figure this out. So then you start going into this deep research thing. And so I developed these little micro chapters that I kind of use between the outline process and the writing process, where I'll go ahead and allow myself a week or 2 weeks to do the research. Like, okay, I know he's got to go from here to here. How would he do that? These are some options. These are the ways, and I have those kind of like just sitting in the back of my mind. And now I'm able to move forward in a linear process. Cause I would always have trouble if I left a big hole behind me. My brain wouldn't let me get past that. I'm like, well, what about chapter 2? You got this thing you haven't finished. And it's like, neaten up your line, I think is the way I think of it.
Interesting. Yeah. So in the outline portion, I don't get bogged down on that because I know that I'm not solving this problem on the battlefield where I have to do it in seconds. I am doing it on the page, and I have a year and a half to do this, and I'm going to be able to fill that gap in. I know there's something I need to put in chapter 2, and I don't quite have it yet, or I haven't quite figured out how I'm going to have him or have an antagonist or something get to a certain point or make a certain action or not get caught or whatever it might be. But guess what? I know over the next year, I'm going to figure that out, and I'm going to be able to come back, and it's going to come to me. So so don't worry about that. I just put a bunch of X's in there, and I leave it as, okay, I'm coming back to this. I know I need to figure this out, but the other things like that theme and that title and those other things that I've already that aren't taking up bandwidth because I have them figured out ahead of time, leaves bandwidth for me to be like, okay, as I write this, I'm going to figure this chapter 2 out. I know something's going to go there. Just don't know quite yet, but I'm not going to stay there in chapter 2 for a month going, I know I got to fix this. I got to fix this. I got to think of something. I need to spend that month working and moving that ball forward. So, but yeah, I think it's always going to be the case. There's going to be things, and you're going to figure out there's going to be gaps as you're writing, and you're going to have to come back and gaps you didn't even know. They're not any X's in this outline that I have to come back to. But now that I'm on chapter 68, oh, okay, I need to go set that up with something over here in chapter 17 or chapter 28 or whatever it might be. And then just fill those in as I go to make that thing as smooth as possible. So, yeah, I love it. I love every part of the process.
Do you ever get stuck at all? Like we've talked a little bit about this before. You're disciplined in a way. Like you told me once, you might not remember that because of your upbringing and some of your hiking and things that you had done before joining the Navy, you had the discipline required to become a SEAL before you became a SEAL, which I think blew me away then and is still a rarity.
Yeah, I mean, it's putting yourself in these positions of adversity, particularly ones where there's no one there to cheer you on. Like if you're boxing, which I did, or doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu early on, really before most people knew what it was in the early 90s. And you're doing those tests where they're sending fresh guys in. And then after 2 minutes or 3 minutes or whatever it was, they'd circle back, get at the back of the line to rest up while you keep going. Like those types of things are awesome. And I thought back to those a lot. But guess what? There are people around you that are keeping you from quitting just because you don't want to quit in front of them. If you do something solo, like you're kayaking or you're doing cross country or whatever else, there's no one there that's going to know, like on this hill, you're training by yourself and you're running hills and you're sprinting hills. Guess what? You're halfway up that hill. There's nobody around. You can look around and you can stop and walk and no one will ever know, but you will. And so I think those ones, even more so, I think they complement one another. The boxing and the jiu-jitsu then were complemented by the solo things that I really like doing because I like to be by myself. That's why I think that's one of the things I was appealing as a kid as far as being a writer. You're by yourself. It's just you and that keyboard. But doing those things like running those hills, sprinting those hills, doing those cross-country long runs where you can stop. It's you training by yourself on a weekend, not with a team, and you can stop, but you don't. So I think those things, the kind of the more boxing stuff where there's people yelling at you and the jiu-jitsu where there's people watching you, and then the stuff where there's nobody watching you and you get to decide if you're going to stop or not. I think those things complement each other and certainly helped in BUD/S, that's for sure. And in life in general, probably.
And especially I'd imagine when you are alone writing is like you seem to almost take this, have this ability to turn what I assume would be a writer's block, which is like excuse, right? It's an excuse. Like if you're able to power through that, like it's very interesting thing. You telling me that I'd thought of that was actually used it on one of the Treadstone books to get through where it was like, I've done these difficult things. And right now I'm just sitting here typing away. Like what is holding me back? And you begin to realize that sometimes it can be discipline and not pushing yourself on something as simple as this. And it was very helpful and interesting.
Oh, it's awesome. And I also was lucky in that I heard Stephen Pressfield talking about writer's block before I started writing, like right around the time I started the first book. And he was on Rogan early on. He's been on a couple of times now, but for those listening, he wrote Legend of Bagger Vance, Gates of Fire, Afghan Campaign, and he also has a series of books on creativity. The War of Art is the first one, and then there's the Authentic Swing, Turning Pro, Do the Work. But in his interview with Rogan, I think it was, he said, hey, you never heard of a trucker getting trucker's block. You never heard of a dentist getting dentist block. You say you're a writer, you're a professional, you sit down, you write. And hearing that early on was like very liberating because I was like, yeah, that's what I am now. I'm not a special operator anymore. That's part of my foundation, part of my past. But now I'm a professional writer. I'm a professional author. Flip that switch. I sit down and now I write. And so, yeah, I haven't had to deal with writer's block just because of Stephen Pressfield saying those words early on. So I don't even consider it. I just sit down and do the work.
That's interesting because you don't realize the things that you get into your brain, your subconscious, that you feel or are told that you should expect to happen. You know, you hear a lot of talk about, like, you know, people in buds. I've known some SEALs and they talk about, you know, the fear of the unknown is bad, but it's not as bad as knowing specifically that X or Y is going to happen. You know, they talk a lot about, you know, being in the pool and doing the shallow water blackouts and, you know, knowing that's going to happen. You haven't even experienced it yet. You can begin, and a lot of people do. You know, when I've missed a deadline, I think to myself improperly, I'm going to miss the next one, right? And that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But if you don't know to fear that, if you don't know that that's happened, and that kind of goes back to listening to other people. If you stay on your course, like, you can oftentimes avoid problems that really don't exist, or problems that you create in your own head.
Yeah, I've kind of wondered that nowadays, where you can jump online and probably find out everything that happens during buds almost hour by hour. Back when I went through, you didn't know. You knew there was this thing called Hell Week that was coming up in a certain number of weeks. I think it was the fourth weekend when I did it. And you know that's coming. You know you have second phase if you pass first phase and make it through Hell Week, and you know that this pool comp thing is coming where a lot of people also wash out. And then in third phase, you know that, hey, this land nav thing is coming, and then you'll have to do some things with explosives for make sure you're safe with explosives and understand what to do with those. So you know those things are coming, but you don't know like the hour by hour type of a breakdown. And I wonder oftentimes, was it better not to know? And I think it was, but I don't know. It probably varies person by person. Some people probably were like, oh man, it's the second week of Hell Week. I know what's coming up tonight because I've studied it or whatever. So I read it online. Oh man, I have 4 more hours till that happens. And then I have to do that for another 3 hours or whatever it is. Oh man, I can't do that. I'm going to ring the bell now. I know I'm not going to make it through that because I know it's coming. I know how horrible it's going to be. And I know a lot of people quit there. So I'm just going to go ring this bell now. So maybe, I don't know. So it probably depends on the person, or someone could be like, oh, I know exactly what's going to happen. All I need to do is make it through this, get to this thing tonight. And then, yeah, it's going to be awful, but people have made it before me. But, you know, most people don't die doing it. So I'm not going to either. And I'm going to make it through the other side. So I don't know. It probably depends on the person, their mentality, or just how they frame it. I don't know. But I think for when we went through, you know, there wasn't an option, so it didn't matter. But there's a lot of unknowns in buds back then. I guess not so much anymore. But for those listening about deadlines, they should probably make their deadlines. Like, don't listen to me about deadlines. I like my soft deadlines, but hard deadlines are probably much better for everyone.
Yeah, well, you've earned the right to have soft deadlines. When you come in, like, you know, and still for a lot of authors, it's like, you know, there is a little bit of leeway, but, you know, deadlines, you know, I've restructured my thinking with deadlines. I've started to tell myself that pressure is a privilege because it means, you know, they expect something from me. So instead of it being a negative, I try to look at it as like, oh, well, like, let's see if we can make this, and then it changed to, I will make this.
Nice.
You know, there's a lot of, being a writer is not as glamorous as you'd first imagine. I would think you'd agree with that, you know? And
yeah, I don't know. I didn't really
think
about that part of it, I guess. I didn't really think about that part of it. I thought about the part I mentioned earlier about being in the cabin on my own, writing, sending it in. So I did think about that, and then very quickly realized in the lead up to the first book that was not going to be the case anymore. And so that hasn't been, but I didn't really have expectations about anything as far as like glamour goes. I just,
I meant like for me, that is a glamorous lifestyle to be able to like sit there and write. No one's bothering you. There's no expectations.
Yeah.
It's just like, hey, we really liked your last book. Give us another one of those when you feel like it. Like I honestly thought that's what it was like.
Yeah.
And
that's a little more pressure than that. A little more pressure than that.
Yeah. Yeah. They say you have forever to write your first book and then only 12 months to write your second and everyone after that. And
that's it. Yeah.
It does take a discipline.
Yeah. No deadline on that first one. Got to get it as good as you can possibly get it before you show it to anybody or show it to that agent. So what are you doing now? Are you writing is there another one or what's next?
Well, so I'd signed a 2-book deal with Blackstone, and it was kind of a miscommunication. They're asking, what are you going to do next? And they used a word like standalone. And what they were talking about was like the next in the series of The Guardian, but you would have to necessarily read the first one. Well,
interesting.
Understood what they were saying. And I was like, so you want a different book? And they're like, wait, would that be possible? And I was like, I don't know. So it was kind of a lucky break, but I was like, okay, here's what I'll do. I'll write a synopsis for the next Guardian. Then I'll write a synopsis for something totally different. I'd always wanted to write a book about a smoke jumper.
Nice.
So I come up with this idea about a smoke jumper. And then I'd learned, I'm trying to get in this space to create different types of heroes. So I was like, well, how would a smoke jumper have skill sets outside of smoke jumping? And it's like, what if he's a criminal? I was like, that could never happen. And I did some research and found out that in California, if you go to jail for a certain, I think, minor offenses, you could go through this fire program.
Yeah.
And if you pass, you become a certified smoke jumper or a certified wildland firefighter, and they expunge your record. And I was like, that'd be kind of cool to have a smoke jumper, but he's maybe hiding his past, so that's what I'm working on now. It's called Burnout. And then hopefully
that's a great title for that. Yeah, that's fantastic. What that's oh man, that's awesome. So that's what I would think of as a standalone. If someone was to tell me to write a standalone, I would think
that's what I assumed, but they had both and they're like, oh, well, this looks really interesting, but we really just meant a next book that happens so you don't have to actually read the first book to understand what's going on. And so kind of stepped into that one, but it worked out pretty well because I'm really excited and enjoying writing this book that's way outside of my comfort zone.
Nice. That is awesome. Congratulations. Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, when am I going to see you next? Am I see you at Thriller Fest or no?
I don't think I'll make Thriller Fest. We have baseball stuff, but I'm definitely going to come to BoucherCon.
Nice.
You can't pass up an opportunity to go to San Diego. I hear it's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's a good spot, but yeah, man. Awesome. Fired up. And this one is June 27th coming, available for pre-order right now, or depending on when you're listening to this, if it's after June 27th, 2023, it's already out there. So awesome, man. Awesome. Great talking to you. That's my favorite part about doing the podcast is that I get to sit down, turn off the phone, not look at the computer, and just catch up with a friend for a little bit. So that's my favorite part about doing this. So congratulations on everything. And man, I'll see you soon.
Appreciate it. Take it easy and keep up the good work.
Take care. Black Rifle Coffee Company. You can help Black Rifle Coffee raise $1 million to benefit veterans through the boot campaign. All you need to do is grab a can of ready-to-drink coffee online or from your local grocery or convenience store. The boot campaign is one of the most renowned veteran-focused nonprofits in the country, working tirelessly to provide life-changing aid and benefits to service members and their families. Join forces with Black Rifle in the boot campaign from May through the end of the year, where every can of ready-to-drink coffee you buy will contribute to making this massive donation possible. Black Rifle ready-to-drink coffee is available in several great-tasting flavors on the Black Rifle Coffee website, at your local convenience or grocery store, and no matter where you are, you can fuel your caffeine fix while supporting veterans. Every time you crack open a can of ready-to-drink, you'll be making a huge difference in the lives of veterans and their families. Black Rifle Coffee is committed to serving the veteran community, and with your help, we can all continue to make a difference. Let's raise a can together to keep fueling Americans for a good cause. Check out blackriflecoffee.com/dangerclose and use code DangerClose20 at checkout for 20% off your purchase and your first coffee club order. blackriflecoffee.com/dangerclose. Drink up. Welcome to the gear highlight portion of the Danger Close podcast. First off, right here, Rusty Furman. This is his book, Go, Go, Go. And he was a team leader for the Iranian embassy siege in 1980 at Prince's Gate in London. He was on the podcast not long ago, and he sent me this book signed. So, Rusty, thank you so much. And on the podcast, we talked about this picture right here, and he sent me this signed as well. And there is Rusty right there making entrance on the Iranian embassy in 1980. MP5 right there, H&K, and the man with no gloves. He was not wearing his gloves that day and became known as the man with no gloves. So, Rusty, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Thank you for this. I'm going to frame it and find a great spot for it. That really means a lot to me. So, thank you. And what else? Schnee's boots right here. I love Schnee's. If you've been following me for a while, you know that. And I've been wearing them for over a decade now. Probably got my first pair, I think, in 2011, 2012, somewhere in there. But these right here are the Montana 2s, and these are the ones that I slip on day to day around here in the mud, in the snow, in the slush out here. So I just find myself slipping into these more often than not. When it gets deep, I go with the higher version, but these ones right here, the lower top version, just easy to get the kids in and out of the car and run around town in. And I wear these, I have worn these for the last 2 winters quite a bit. So love these. Check them out, schnees.com, and they have a bunch of great boots up there and a bunch of other things. And if you're passing through Bozeman, like I did the other day, stop by and check out their store. It is awesome. I hadn't been up there before and absolutely loved it. I will be back. Check out all their stuff. And SIG right here. This is the X5 P226, and this thing, solid. Look at that thing. Oh yeah. So that is nice. I like a heavy pistol. I like a light rifle, but a heavy pistol. And this thing right here, awesome. So check that out. P226 X5. Nice. And website, officialjackcarr.com. Go to the upper right-hand corner for the merch. There's a bunch of new stuff on there that you can check out. And this workbench right here, Badass Dash Workbench. This thing is solid. Love it. So check them out and follow them on the socials as well. And Triple Ot, this shirt that I'm wearing right here, I'm going to get a few more because this thing is awesome. Triple Ot, you can check them out. Just type that into the search engine, and they have a bunch of really cool stuff out there. So thank you, Triple Ot, and I'll see you next time. Take care out there. Thank you for tuning in to the Danger Close podcast, an Ironclad original presented by Navy Federal Credit Union. Only the Dead, my latest novel, is on shelves right now. To find out more about Josh Hood, go to his website, joshuahoodbooks.com, JOSHUAHOOD books.com. Follow him on the social channels from there, and be sure to pick up a copy of The Guardian, which is on shelves right now. Follow me at Jack Carr USA on the social channels, officialjackcarr.com. That is the website. Click on shop in the upper right-hand corner for the merch. And if you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to leave a 5-star rating and review wherever you get your podcasts. Until the next time, take care out there, stay safe, be strong, keep fighting.